Good evening. Today's topic is about the life cycle of Servlet. Um, First of all, we know what is Servlet. You have to know what is Servlet. Servlet is a server-side programming. Servlet is a server-side programming used to generate dynamic web page. So in order to generate the dynamic web page, we use the concept called as a Servlet. So now we are learning about the life cycle of Servlet. So see here, life cycle of satellite is described by four phases and three life cycle methods. So life cycle of satellite consists of four phases, namely instantiation phase, initialization phase, servicing phase, destruction phase. Total four phases. And satellite consists of three life cycle methods, namely init method, service method, destroy method. So we'll come to where will we use these methods. So first phase is instantiation phase. So see here. Whenever the first client request comes, whenever the first client request comes, which is expecting service from the satellite engine, nothing but satellite container. It will execute the satellite. To execute the satellite, we use satellite engine. So satellite engine is also called a satellite container. So whenever the first client request comes, which is expecting service from the satellite engine load the satellite class file into memory and create an instance of the class. So satellite engine load the satellite file, class file, and create an instance to this class. So this instance cannot provide service to the client request because it is missing two pieces of information. So what are those? Contested information, nothing but textual information. Second one is initialization interface, nothing but phase two, nothing but phase two, initialization phase. So in initialization phase, we use a method called as init method. So init method is used in um initialization phase. Whenever this init method is used, the satellite will get servletness. Servletness means satellite can provide service to the client. So in this instantiation phase, we are not using init method. So satellite cannot provide service to this client request. So see here, in instantiation phase, satellite is just born but unable to provide service to the client request. So in this first phase, that is instantiation phase, the satellite is born but unable to provide service to the client request because uh, it is not using init method. Whenever we use init method, satellite will get the servletness and it can provide service to the client. So this method is used in initialization phase. So we are adjusting first phase, namely instantiation phase. So we can say in this phase that the satellite is just born. Um, so and it is unable to provide the client request. See here, this instance cannot provide service, cannot serve the client request. Nothing but it cannot provide service to the client request because it is missing two pieces of information, namely textual information and initialization information. So in this method, it is not using any method. So satellite cannot provide service to the client because satellite cannot get satelliteness. So in first phase, that is initialization phase, in first phase, that is instantiation method. The satellite is just born but unable to provide the client request. Since it is missing two pieces of information, that is textual information and initialization information. So first phase is instantiation phase. So here the satellite is just born but unable to provide service to the client because it is missing two pieces of information, textual information and initialization information. So this is what we learn in this first phase. So second phase is initialization phase. Second phase is initialization phase. So see here. The Servlet engine create a Servlet config object. In this object, it will encapsulate the initialization and the context information. So see here in first phase, the Servlet is unable to provide client request because it is missing two pieces of information. That is the context information and the initialization information. So in phase 2, these two pieces of information is combined here. So select config object, combine the two pieces of information that is missing in phase 1 called as initialization phase and initialization information and the context information. Now the select engine call unique method on the select instance by supplying select config reference as an object. So in order to provide service to the client, the Servlet must get the servletness. To get servletness, Servlet engine must call the init method. So in init method, the Servlet engine passing an argument called as Servlet config object. In Servlet config object, the Servlet config object contains the initialization information and context information which is missing in a instantiation method. So in this phase, the Servlet engine call the init method by passing this Servlet config object as an argument. So when of this init method is executed, the initialization phase is over. Now the Servlet will get servletness. Nothing but Servlet is ready to provide service to the client request. So in init method, the Servlet engine pass the Servlet config Servlet config object as an argument, which contains initialization and the context information. So once the init method is executed, the Servlet will get the servletness. Nothing but the Servlet is ready to provide the client request. But we learn in this third point. So in the life cycle of Servlet, the first phase is instantiation phase and second phase is initialization phase. So these two phases, instantiation phase and initialization phase will happen only once. So phase 1 and phase 2, that is instantiation phase and initialization phase. So these two phases will happen only once. Whereas the servicing phase can be called more than once. So we learn this servicing phase here. See, the servicing phase. The Servlet engine create two objects, namely Servlet request and Servlet response object. So in servicing phase, the Servlet engine create two objects, namely Servlet request and Servlet response object. The Servlet engine call the service method on the Servlet instance by supplying a request and response object reference as a argument. So the Servlet engine calls the service method here. In this method, the Servlet engine pass two arguments, namely request object and response object. The Servlet engine pass these two methods, namely request object and response object as an argument in this service method. Um, um, the Servlet uses this request object to capture the user input. So Servlet method, in Servlet method, we are passing two arguments, namely request object and the response object. This request object is used to capture the user input. So this request object is used to capture the user input. So the responsibility of Servlet request object, nothing but request object is used to capture the user input. And the second object is a response object. And the purpose of second object is nothing but a select response object. It will deliver the dynamic content to the client. To deliver the dynamic web page to the client, the select uses the second object called as response object. So the select engine called the service method. In this service method, the select pass two objects, namely request and response object. The request object is used to capture the user input and response object to generate the dynamic page to the client. Um, so see here, the select process the data, build dynamic web page with the help of response object, select response object, and deliver the dynamic web page to the client. So So the select engine passing two objects, namely response object, request object, and response object in the service method. The purpose of request object is to capture the user input, and the purpose of response object is to build the dynamic web page and to generate the dynamic web page to the client. Now, once the service method is completely executed, that means select that means client request is processed. So whenever the service method will be executed, we can say that request is processed. So for every client request, the service method is called once. So see here, for every request, the servlet call the service method. For every client request, the servlet call the service method. So this is servicing phase. So in servicing phase, the select engine call the service method, which passes request object and response object as an arguments. The request object is used to capture the user input. The response object is to build the dynamic web page and to generate the dynamic web page to the client. When all the service method is completely executed, we can say that the request is completed. So for every request, the service method is called once. And finally, the fourth phase, destruction phase. See, when the administrator unload the servlet, nothing but the servlet is taken out of service. Before the servlet just before the servlet instance dies, the servlet method called the destroy method on the servlet instance. So if you want to destroy the servlet, nothing but he want to unlock the servlet, we call the method called as destroy method. So if to destroy the servlet, to unlock the servlet, we call the destroy method. So see this diagram, graphical representation of servlet life cycle. So Servlet engine load the Servlet class and the Servlet engine create a Servlet class instance. So this is a phase one. This is a phase one. Phase one means severe instantiation phase. So in instantiation phase, we can say that Servlet is a just burn. Servlet is a burn. So this is a phase one. In phase one, the Servlet load the engine load the Servlet class file and create an instance to that class file. And this one is the phase two. And this one is a phase two. Phase two is nothing but initialization phase. Initialization phase. So in this initialization phase, the Servlet engine create Servlet engine create an object called a Servlet config object, which contains contest information and see here contest information and initialization information. So the Servlet config object consists of two pieces of information which is missing in phase one. That is contest information and initialization information. So the Servlet engine create the Servlet config object and pass this object as an argument to the init method. So once the init method is executed, the Servlet will get Servlet list. Nothing but Servlet is ready to provide service to the client. So this is a phase 2. That is initialization phase. So phase 1, phase 2 will be called only once. Next phase is servicing phase. Nothing but providing service to the client. So see here. The Servlet engine create two objects, namely request object and response object. Request object is used to capture the user input. Response object is used to build the dynamic web page and generate dynamic web page to the client. So the Servlet engine create these two objects, namely Servlet request object and the Servlet response object, and pass these two objects as a parameters as arguments to the service method. So once the service method executed, the client request is completed. So here, for every client request, the Servlet engine call the service method. For every client request, the Servlet engine call the service method, which contains a request and response as a parameters. Servlet request and Servlet response will be the objects for the service method. So for every client request, the service method is called. To call the service method, the Servlet engine create two objects, namely request object and the response object, and these two objects are passed as a parameters to this service method. So for every client request, the service method is called. Finally, destroy method. So you see here, if there is no request from the client, the Servlet wait for the client request. No request, the Servlet it will just wait for the client request. See here, if there is no response from the client, it will wait for the client request. So finally, destroy method. So in order to destroy this Servlet, nothing but to take the Servlet out of service, we call the method called as a destroy method. So Servlet engine call the destroy method to destroy the Servlet, nothing but to taking Servlet out of service. If we do not call the destroy method, the Servlet just wait for the client request. See here, just wait for the Servlet will just wait for the client request. If we do not call the destroy method. If you want to destroy the Servlet, we will call the Servlet engine call the destroy method. So once the Servlet engine call the destroy method, the Servlet will be taken out of service. If the Servlet engine does not call the destroy method, the Servlet just wait for the client request. So this is a let's say class Servlet. Thank you.